were able to bring him back a few times, but the damage was already done.
They couldn't fix his heart. This kid with the biggest heart in the world. You can't fix his heart.
Now imagine 30 people in the middle of the street. This wasn't just a fight, it was a brawl, a riot.
He has his cell phone up, it kicks on and starts recording, and it captures the ultimate moment.
There was a picture posted on social media. There was a comment made.
That comment started a firestorm.
We want to fight, we want to fight, we want to fight.
The end result is this huge desire for payback, to get revenge.
He came with the intent to seek and destroy, and that's what he did.
Just before 5 p.m. on March 18, 2020, 911 dispatchers in Albany, New York, received multiple calls about a street brawl on Madison Avenue.
You just have absolute chaos. It's people running around, you're screaming. It's just a formula for disaster.
911, I have a disturbance at Madison Avenue. Okay, is there a fight going on there? Absolutely, yes. Somebody's gonna get hurt out here.
You can hear a series of 911 calls.
I was on the phone with 911, my mom was on it, everyone was on the phone.
When police finally arrive at the scene, there's people all over the place, and a 22-year-old man laying in a pool of blood.
Paramedics reached the young man who was bleeding from an injury to his chest. Several of the young man's family members are among the crowd. They identify him as 22-year-old Maurice Skeen.
He's on the ground and he said, "Graham, I gotta get up. I gotta get up, Graham." He said, "I can't breathe." And I said, "No, Maurice, you can't get up. You can't get up. You have to lay down."
Maurice Mo Skeen was born on January 24, 1998. Maurice's parents weren't able to care for him, so his grandmother, Tracy, stepped up to the plate.
When he was 5, he came to live with me permanently. We were inseparable from that point on. Maurice was an easy kid. He was easy. He wanted to make you happy. And as long as you were okay, he was okay.
Maurice was talented and confident.
Maurice wanted to play basketball because his brothers played basketball. But Maurice wasn't that good at basketball. But he stuck with it and he continued with it until he became really good at basketball.
Maurice graduated high school.
He kept his grades up. He did excellent in school. So proud to see him walk across that stage. After he graduated Albany High School, he went to Mohawk University. And he was just, just excited about going to college and happy to be there.
And Albany graduating is a big deal within itself. Some people aren't fortunate enough to do that. So with him graduating and going off to college, he made everyone very proud with that.
He wanted to be an engineer because he was very good at math and measurement and all of that.
But at school, something else grabbed his interest.
He went to college. Some kind of way he got interested in rap, and he came home from school one day and he said, "Graham, I'm gonna be a rapper. If that's what you want to do, I support you." And he put everything he had into becoming a rapper.
Maurice teamed up with his friend, Jamir.
Got an opportunity to open up for Little Baby and The Baby, and with us opening up, me and Maurice, it was about 200 to 300 people within the stands getting ready for a packed out show. And you know, that was great.
In 2020, Maurice shifted his focus to helping his grandmother realize a dream of her own.
Maurice knew that I wanted my own restaurant. That's always been my dream. So him and his brothers got together and they presented me with a storefront. And he took me down there and he opened the door and both of them was like, Graham, this is your dream.
Him and his brother put their minds together to get this rental space that was like gutted. They went in and they threw out all the old stuff. They was painting, they was doing floors, they was sheetrocking, and he was doing majority of the work. So like that was happening and then boom.
But before the business is ready to open, a street brawl leaves Maurice bleeding from a stab wound to the chest.
He was still conscious at that time, but he kept saying that it hurt. It hurts.
This young man is still laying in his pool of blood, conscious, saying that it hurts. So paramedics try to stop the blood and rush him to Albany Hospital.
When law enforcement first arrived, the scene was hectic and crowded. Within a matter of minutes, the crowd has disappeared.
So many people involved, maybe up to 50 people that are located there as potential witnesses. Unfortunately, most people took off.
Instead, investigators look for physical evidence.
Police are doing their job, combing the area, looking for evidence, trying to find any little piece that would lead them to a suspect. But all they find is a pool of blood and a hairbrush laying in it.
The blood is photographed, and the hairbrush bagged as evidence. Then, detectives spot something that might give them what they need. Cameras.
The police department have direct access to cameras at red lights at most intersections. It gives them the ability to see if at that intersection where this fight took place, whether or not there's any camera angles that pick up the fight, parts of the fight, maybe the stabbing.
Investigators request footage from the city.
In order to stab someone, especially in the heart, you have to be at a certain range. You have to be in close proximity. So the question is, who was Maurice fighting?
"22-year-old Maurice Skeen is fighting for his life at Albany Medical Center after being stabbed in the chest during a street brawl. His family waits at Maurice's grandmother's house for news of his condition.
It was COVID, all of that rules and stuff. So we calling to see how he doing in the emergency room, calling. And they put me on hold. And she was like, we have to get back to you.
Hours later, homicide detectives show up at the front door.
I was like already frustrated, so like when they came in, they was like lingering a little bit. But I'm like, just speak, like.
And it was like, I didn't make it.
Doctors tried really hard to keep him alive, and they were able to bring him back a few times. But the wound was deep, there was a hole in his heart, a piece was gone, so the damage was already done. Maurice Skeen dies of a single stab wound to his heart.
They couldn't fix his heart. His heart. This kid with the biggest heart in the world, you can't fix his heart.
In spite of the family's grief, detectives must press them for information about the brawl. They say it started when a young woman from the neighborhood, Layla, passed away. Layla suffered from spinal muscular atrophy.
When she passed away, there was a wake. Somebody took a photo of Layla at the wake.
There was a picture posted on social media, and there was a comment made.
The comment was posted by Maurice's cousin, 18-year-old Talia Green.
One of the girls said she looked flat. My niece Talia said, flat like who? Flat Stanley?
Flat Stanley was a child's story about a boy that was as flat as a piece of paper.
And then that, everybody got the laughing emoji. And after that, my niece's phone was just ringing, chirping, dinging off the hook.
Everybody took it the wrong way. I mean, I know I should never said it, but yeah. People was texting me all over Messenger, asking me, like, oh, why you say that? Basically like coming aggressive to me. Oh, we want to fight, we want to fight, we want to fight.
The tension came to a head earlier that evening.
I was at home watching television, me and Talia. She's always in my bed, so we were laying in my bed watching TV. And her phone was blowing up. There was no way that this was just one person texting that fast and that many at one time. And so I looked over and I said, who is that blowing up your phone like that? And she was like, these stupid girls, Grandma. I was like, well, what's going on with these stupid girls? She said, and now everybody wants to fight me.
She was very loved by a lot of people. So when people saw this Facebook post of Talia, things became heated. Emotions being what they were at the time after the loss of someone that they loved.
There were a car full of girls that came to fight Talia that day. Talia has always been a tough kid. So Talia went out there, there goes the name. She went out there and she fought. I'm calling the police. They're not answering. They're not sending anybody. Cop rides by, I stop him.
The fight gets broken up. The cops basically talk to them and say, you got to get out of here. The girls say something like they're going to come back. Shortly after the police leave, people came back, but this time a lot more.
And that's when Maurice and my other grandson got up and went outside. My protector went out there to protect, as he always does.
He's tried to de-escalate the situation, but it got worse.
And that's when all hell broke loose.
This wasn't just a fight. It was a brawl, a riot, something straight out of a movie.
Tracy is calling 911 and trying to get the cops back, and she keeps calling, and they're telling her someone's coming.
911, what's that? If you're emergency, I'm calling about that. Y'all waiting for somebody to get killed? What's going on there? You can hear what's going on.
And they just don't get there fast enough.
A girl yells out to me, yo, you better get your boy. He leaking. And so when I looked up, I saw blood on Maurice's shirt. And so I ran to him. And I guess that's when he noticed, because he hadn't noticed that he was even stabbed at the time. And I carried him out to the sidewalk, and I laid him down.
In the chaos, Maurice Skeen had been stabbed.
I just didn't expect a lot of this. All of this, I didn't expect to be sitting here talking about him in the past tense.
In his service, there was a good amount of people at his service. Unfortunately, it was during COVID, so there was a lot of restrictions on what could and couldn't be done. We was allowed to have a viewing for him, and we was allowed to bring him to the graveyard. We weren't allowed to do an actual service, but for the viewing and for bringing him to the graveyard, there was a great number of people. Once again, he was charismatic, you know, so he was a hard guy not to like.
Investigators in Albany, New York, learned that the deadly street brawl that led to the stabbing death of Maurice Skeen was the result of a clash on social media.
There was a comment said, and there was back and forth going on. It transpired into them fighting, ended in Maurice getting stabbed.
The brawl took place outside of Maurice's grandmother's home. While several of his relatives witnessed the chaos, no one witnessed the actual stabbing.
The fight was total chaos. I couldn't remember none of it because I was so emotional up there. I didn't even know who had done it. And I was right there, I didn't know. Nobody knew who killed him. Nobody saw.
Maurice's godmother, Shantae, recalls seeing one man make verbal threats toward Maurice.
The gentleman kept saying, yo, I'm gonna kill you. I'm gonna kill you. And he had his hand in his pocket. That hand never left his pocket. The boy had the illest look in his eye. And he kept telling Mo he was gonna kill him. Kill him, kill him, I'm gonna kill you, I'm gonna kill you. He said it so much that Shantae said that the hairs literally stood up on her real head. You understand? Under her wig. She said she believed him.
Was the man gripping a knife inside his pocket? Shantae is unable to ID him. Talia gives investigators the names of several individuals who were present at the fight.
I know of most of them. Like, I went to school with most of them, passed them in the hallway or whatever.
Hopeful that someone else saw something, investigators start knocking on doors.
All of the witnesses that were there, the neighbors and everything, not one person saw this person with a knife in their hand that actually stabbed the victim.
But that doesn't mean they can't help.
A lot of the neighbors came outside and people started recording with their phones.
You had people filming from their windows, from the buildings.
As technicians work to collect the footage, investigators hone in on the list of names from Talia.
The detectives put together what are called photo rays. They showed these photo rays to the family members so that they could try to begin to identify who had come to the house and engaged in this fight with Maurice.
Shantae is certain she spots the man who threatened Maurice.
I didn't see the stabbing, but I know who said he wanted to kill him.
Shantae Coleman identified this person, Darius Coakley, in a photo ray saying this is the person.
Investigators are eager to speak with 21-year-old Darius. But when they go to his home, they learn from witnesses that Darius is gone.
He packed up his things quickly, called his mother, and left the area. He deactivated his social media.
It appears that Darius is laying low. As investigators continue to look for him, they learn the footage from the city's surveillance cameras is ready.
Unfortunately, we, pretty quickly learned that although it caught portions of the fight, where the stabbing happens is right out of view.
Investigators still have the cell phone footage collected from witnesses, which has continued to trickle in as news of Maurice's death spreads through his neighborhood.
Given that they were cell phone videos, they were moving a lot. They were not steady, and they were from a variety of angles. it wasn't clear where the knife was or who was doing the stabbing.
The most difficult part in this case was sorting out who was responsible for stabbing Maurice, because he was fighting with multiple different people and it was only a single stab wound. It was a very quick blow that struck him one time.
We decided to send those videos to the New York State Police Lab so that they could arrange them and use technology to try to make it less complicated or confusing. And that took a lot of time. They have, you know, a massive caseload.
While they wait, investigators ask Maurice's family to take a look at the videos, paying close attention to who was near Maurice.
In watching the videos, we could see that where we believe Maurice had been stabbed, there was at least 3 people that could have been the suspect.
One of those men is Darius Coakley. Maurice's family helps identify the other 2.
The 2 individuals that were closest to Maurice at the time of the stabbing, apart from Darius Coakley, was a Ramir Stevenson and a Najalik Giggets. Before Maurice is stabbed, the person that he is physically fighting with and punching is Ramir Stevenson.
If you watch the videos and my cousin come out the gate, he's the first person he come in contact with fighting.
Darius Coakley can see that the victim is fighting with Ramir, and he positions himself right behind a vehicle that they're going to pass through. And at that area where basically 2 cars are parked at a curb is the victim, Maurice Skeen, Darius Coakley, Ramir Stevenson, and Najali Giggets, all in a very confined space. And we know that Maurice is stabbed there.
Did Ramir stab Maurice as they fought? Or did Darius or Najali take advantage of the chaotic moment to plunge a knife into Maurice's heart?
There were 3 main potential suspects. We knew that we had to eliminate 2 individuals that did not do it.
Following the stabbing death of Maurice Skeen, investigators in Albany used cell phone video collected from witnesses to narrow the list of suspects down to 3. Darius Coakley, Ramir Stevenson, and Najali Giggets. They find Ramir the next day.
When the police find Ramir Stevenson, he is stopped by law enforcement in, I believe it was North Carolina, a southern state. He is arrested because he has a large quantity of marijuana in the car. And when the police find out that he'd been stopped in North Carolina, they either drove or flew to interview him. He was willing to speak with the police, and he told them, if I remember correctly, that he didn't know who had stabbed the victim, that he wasn't the one that did it, but he was willing to speak to a degree openly about what happened, which was not ultimately very indicative of him being the suspect.
As for the remaining 2 suspects, Darius Coakley remains in the wind. And it looks like Najali Giggets may be as well.
We obtained information that he fled immediately after, and that's also a huge indicator of someone's guilt that we look at as detectives, is what are someone's actions after they commit a crime.
Najali Giggets had some warrants on some other charges, and it appeared that he was hiding out.
Months after the murder, investigators get an unexpected surprise when Darius reaches out to them. They learn that Darius has spent the last couple of months at his father's house in Brooklyn.
Darius hired an attorney. That attorney called the police department and said, don't speak to my client. And if there are going to be charges, you are going to, charge my client with any sort of a crime, contact me.
For the next several months, the investigation stalls out. Maurice's family grapples with grief and unanswered questions.
with situations like this, right, everyone wants answers quick, right? We forget that there's a process that goes on with everything. So there was times when everyone is frustrated.
We felt that this was a heat of the moment homicide. This was personal in the moment, and we felt that the risk was worth taking our time.
Over a year after Maurice was killed, investigators finally locate Najalik Giggets. Najalik denies stabbing Maurice, and it appears he avoided questioning because of his outstanding warrants. With all three suspects denying involvement, investigators have no choice but to turn back to the evidence. They learn that the state lab has finished compiling the cell phone videos.
We had sent the videos to the lab, and we got back what are called compilation videos. Simple enough, right? They laid them out the best that they could. But even them, they were tough to discern.
There's a moment in one of the videos that catches their attention.
On that video, after Darius Coakley is getting thrown around by Maurice Skeen, you see someone run over and bend down to grab something.
It's funny how timing is, but a truck passes by on video and blocks what she is reaching over, bending over to pick up. But it captures just enough to show that she bends down and picks something up in the middle of the street.
Police can only assume that this can potentially be the murder weapon.
They keep watching. Investigators come upon another clip that appears to zero in on the exact seconds they have been looking for.
As fate may have it, there was a gentleman, he was sitting at a red light, and he witnesses this brawl start, and lucky for us, he put up his cell phone and hit record.
When we took that video, zoomed in on it, and went frame by frame, you're actually able to see when the knife is displayed by Darius.
And it captures the ultimate moment. Darius pulls out a knife and stabs the victim in the heart. Darius stabbed Maurice. It's the type of thing that once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Investigators know they will need more than a grainy video to convict Darius. Law enforcement identified the young woman in the video as Alexis Brown. Albany police bring her in for questioning.
They show her the video footage. She felt cornered and she decided to cooperate.
She was actually quite forthcoming with information, and I think that she truly wanted to help us.
Alexis goes on to share that she was the driver to a group of people who were part of the fight, and that there was someone in her car with a knife.
That person was Darius Coakley. Alexis describes the brawl as pure chaos. And then all of a sudden, she realized it had turned deadly.
You just see arms. You don't know what struck him, who struck him. He's holding his chest, and then he's just gasping. He just go down to one knee. He's just sitting there.
Alexis says she saw Darius fleeing toward her car. He called back to her.
She hears a male voice as she says it on the stand. She hears a male voice come from her car and say, you know, pick that up or pick up the knife. And she looks down in the middle of the street and sees it. She picks up the knife.
During that interview, she stated that she put it in the cup holder of her vehicle and then didn't see what happened to the knife after that.
While Alexis didn't see the stabbing, Her statement allows investigators to connect the dots.
There was only one person who was injured to the point where they were bleeding. That knife had to have been the weapon that stabbed and killed Maurice.
Police in Albany have zeroed in on Darius Coakley as the prime suspect in the stabbing death of Maurice Skeen. They learned that 21-year-old Darius is a lifelong resident of Albany.
Darius had a mother who was a single mom, working 2 jobs. He was never in any sort of legal trouble. Darius had no criminal record.
They also learned that Darius met Layla in high school. He formed an intense bond with the young woman in the wheelchair.
Darius and her were incredibly close. He obviously cared, loved this person.
Investigators believe that Darius was grief-stricken over Layla's death. So much so that he joined a group headed to seek revenge in her name at Maurice's grandmother's house. But investigators believe that Darius headed into the fight armed with more than his fists.
That's the thing, Darius included a weapon. And, you know, he's the only one out of all the people that were fighting, 30 plus people. Everybody just used their hands, but he felt the need that to pull out a knife.
Over a year after the murder, Darius is finally arrested on August 6th, 2021.
We felt 100% confident presenting it to a grand jury. Once the grand jury indicted him for murder in the second degree and we had a warrant in hand from the grand jury, we contacted his attorney, who then had him turn himself in to the police department.
When Darius came into the police station, he had just shark eyes looking at us like there was no soul left in his eyes. And I told him that he was under arrest for murder.
Prosecutors prepare for trial. As they do, they realize a potentially catastrophic mistake.
The crime scene and the placement of some of the blood evidence was really crucial in this case. And in the crime scene photos, you could see that where he went to the ground, there was a big spot of blood. The police never swabbed that pool of blood.
A weak point defense attorneys will certainly seize.
That pool of blood was important because he must have been stabbed before he lands on the ground with the pool of blood. And the people he was with right before that must have been the stabber.
In a case like this, all you need is reasonable doubt in order to have the suspect walk.
The defense at trial, they could easily say that, they can't prove that he was stabbed at that point. That could have been someone else's blood. They can't prove to you whose blood that was.
Prosecutors team up with investigators. They pore over the evidence, zeroing in on what could be their saving grace.
A hairbrush gets dropped during the scrum in the street and it lands in blood. That hairbrush was collected. That hairbrush was in the pool of blood. We rushed that hairbrush to the lab. They did DNA testing and it was Maurice's blood, just like we knew it was.
So by process of elimination, we can say Maurice Skeen was stabbed here. Who was around him at that time? And we're just systematically going through and dissecting the video evidence and the witness statements we have. And once we determined who was in proximity of Maurice at the time of the stab, we knew it was Darius Coakley, Najalik Giggets, and Ramir Stevenson. At the time of the stab, Ramir Stevenson has his hands out, nothing in them. Najalik Giggets, you can see him fighting, nothing in his hands. The only person with something in their hand was Darius Coakley, and it was in his left hand.
As Darius's trial date looms near, prosecutors are confident. But so is Darius. Instead of alleging he didn't intend to kill Maurice, Darius pleads not guilty.
Darius Coakley opted to go all or nothing. Here's someone who had no prior criminal record. He hasn't been to state prison. Darius does not want to take that chance. He goes all in.
In November 2022, 2.5 years after Maurice Skeen is stabbed during a street brawl, his accused murderer, Darius Coakley, goes on trial. Darius's defense team makes the most of the chaos that surrounded Maurice's murder.
A common defense tactic can be confusion. In a street fight, there was so much going on that the argument really was you can't tell what's happening.
The defense team took a stand of trying to pin the murder on the other two suspects, Ramir Stevenson and Nazalik Giggets.
Their focus really was simply that it was not him and focusing on Ramir and Nazalik. They didn't call any witnesses. The defendant didn't testify.
Prosecutors counter. They call Maurice's family members, who give heart-wrenching accounts of the night he died.
Maurice's grandmother testified about Maurice being the protector, the elder boy of the family, and he's trying to protect the family. Telling everybody they need to leave, stop disrespecting my grandmother's house. Darius, the defendant in this case, got into his face.
And during that part of it, Maurice sort of takes his hand and mushes it into Darius and sort of shoves him away.
Shantae, Maurice's godmother, testifies that Darius became enraged.
Darius just gets incredibly mad. He's seething. He is saying that he's going to kill him. He is saying verbally he's going to kill him.
Prosecutors show what happened next when they present the jury with video from the brawl.
I was able to really present to them some still shots that were zoomed in, slowed down with, things that were circled and show it to them over and over again.
It really came together with the state police and the phenomenal video work they did, where now we had a knife in Coakley's hand. We had a knife in Coakley's left hand, and he's using that left hand with that knife to stab Maurice Skeen in the chest.
You could see clearly that it was not Nazalik and Ramir. It was Darius Coakley.
As they close, prosecutors are clear that Darius's actions in those seconds were no accident.
He did have the intent to cause the death because where he stabbed him. He stabbed him right in the middle of his chest, which is where we all know what's in the middle of our chest, which is the heart, and that's exactly where he got him. So even though he only stabbed him once, we believe that he had the intent to cause the death of Maurice.
Maurice was defending his family, like I believe any man would do. Darius came to seek and destroy. He came with a knife. He came with the intent to seek and destroy, and that's what he did.
Finally, after closing arguments, the jury announces they have reached a verdict.
Darius Coakley was found guilty of second-degree murder and the case of Maurice Skeen.
The judge imposed 25 years to life in state prison. You have a crass comment which prompted this huge desire for payback. To pay back, get revenge. We're going to get revenge for what you said to this young woman who just died 3 weeks ago. And then you have Darius Coakley, plunging a knife into the heart of Maurice. The result now is Maurice's life has been taken, and Darius Coakley's life is now in he's in state custody.
We got justice for Maurice, but at the same time, someone else's life is being destroyed.
But it's a lose-lose. Another black man behind bars for 25 years. Darius doesn't understand the light that he took out of my family's eyes. Maurice died not because he feared what was in front of him, but because he was defending what was behind him.
To honor Maurice, his family opened the store. A dream Maurice shared with his grandmother.
Maurice worked all day and all night in the winter to get it open, and he missed the opening. He wasn't there.
After that happened, his brother had to take on to finish everything up, and he got the store up and running. And now it grew into another. He has a juice bar across the street. So, you know, but Mo would be a part of all this. He was there. He was a big part of it.
I miss him. I just wish he was.
Massachusetts is home to some of the most prestigious academic institutions in the country, including MIT, Radcliffe, and Harvard University. But the city's elite reputation also comes with a dark side. In 2009, the murder of a young man within Harvard's hallowed halls tarnishes the university's squeaky clean image. And as the investigation exposes deep problems permeating its esteemed campus, a mother launches a desperate fight to clear her son's name. Cambridge's history as a center of academic excellence began in the 1600s, when Harvard was formed by the Massachusetts Bay Colony to train men for the ministry and public leadership.
Many of the presidents of the United States, many of the members of Congress, whether in the Senate or in the House, have been graduates.
As Harvard grew, so did Cambridge. After the Civil War, former slaves arrived to begin new lives, along with immigrants from the Caribbean, Europe, Canada, and Russia.
Cambridge was a draw because there were jobs. Many of the institutions, they were looking for immigrants to work in certain areas, such as housekeeping. Some of the hospitals were looking for workers and so forth.
Cambridge is known as the melting pot because you have a blend of all different nationalities here. There were Black people, white people, Spanish people, and people of Asian persuasion.
For many people looking for a better life in Cambridge, Harvard offered hope that they or their children might one day even become esteemed graduates themselves.
It is part of the lure why immigrants wanted to get to Harvard, even refugees. If I can get to America, maybe I can go to Harvard one day. That has been the lure. It's just the aura that Harvard has.
But with an acceptance rate of only 3% and a student body that is only 15% African American, those dreams are all but out of reach for most folks living in Cambridge's minority communities.
Where you would expect, with all these higher education institutions of such prominence, that you would see more of an evidence of mobility for a lot of Black and brown people because of those things. And you really don't get that kind of feeling here.
We live right next to Harvard, and they're not going to accept none of us to get into Harvard. I don't know anybody that ever attended the school Harvard.
But even if most people in Cambridge will never actually attend Harvard, its presence is still an inescapable part of everyday life.
Cambridge is synonymous with Harvard, and Harvard is synonymous with Cambridge.
So much so that Harvard Yard is just another de facto neighborhood in the city.
Nobody thinks that lives here be worried about, oh, I shouldn't go across the grounds. There's nothing there to say no trespassing or no walking through. It's just like you walk through your neighborhood anywhere.
But in 2009, one young man who had grown up in the shadow of Harvard would walk onto its campus one last time. And what happened to him that day would thrust Harvard onto the national stage for all the wrong reasons. It's late afternoon on May 18th, just days before graduation, when Cambridge police are dispatched to an incident on Harvard's campus. The lead detective who responded to the scene is in silhouette to protect his identity.
It was a nice day. I remember it was a little cool. It was still sunny at that time. It was light out, clear.
Students had been enjoying the usual peace and quiet on campus when a young man had suddenly burst out of a dorm called Kirkland House, staggering and gravely wounded.
He ran down towards Mount Auburn Street, stopped there. He had told somebody he had been shot and asked somebody to call 911, and that's where he collapsed on the sidewalk.
Cambridge police arrive within minutes to find the victim bleeding on the sidewalk. He's quickly identified as 21-year-old Justin Cosby.
He was still conscious when they got there. Professional ambulance was on scene, and they were treating the victim. They said that the bullet ricocheted off his hip or his pelvis.
As Justin is rushed to the hospital, detectives begin searching for answers. One immediate question was, how could something like this happen at such a prestigious university?
It was beyond belief that it would happen there. The shooting, a crime like this.
For those who know Justin, it's even more unbelievable it could happen to him. Justin Cosby was born on June 13, 1987, to single mother Denise Cosby.
Justin was my youngest child. He was my baby. He was born in Richmond, Virginia. When Justin was a year old, I decided that I wanted to make a change. So I asked my sister, could I come to Boston? I knew a couple of my other brothers had come before me and started their life here. So I thought that might be something that we might do.
But Denise was ultimately drawn to Cambridge, 20 minutes away.
I come from a pretty large family, and we all went to college, and we all graduated. So when I started to bring my children up, I was looking for an area where they would have those opportunities. So when I was given the opportunity to move here, it was just a no-brainer.
They settled into a high-rise apartment called the 808, just minutes away from Harvard's campus.
I met Justin. It was literally like around first grade, just playing basketball at the YMCA. Anytime we play basketball, you're on the same team. Whatever we doing, we did everything together. Come over his house, come over my house. It's instant since that day.
He was well-liked dude, very popular, but humble, and that's what made it like so dope to be cool with him, because he was the man.
Not only was Justin popular amongst his friends, but he also excelled academically.
I guess it's kind of ingrained in you because you're around excellence. When you go to public school in Cambridge, from the 3rd grade, or even the 2nd grade, you're at the MIT Museum and, do debates in Harvard in the 6th grade.
But after high school, Justin didn't have the connections or the money to get into Harvard, so he enrolled in Salem State University, 20 miles away.
He was very interested in IT. He was also interested in owning his own businesses. He even talked to me about maybe I will have a used car lot and I can sell cars.
He was flourishing out there, as he should.
Justin's commute from Salem State to Cambridge never stood in the way of him visiting his mother every chance he got.
He didn't have any type of shame about being a mama's boy. I can remember him being around some of his friends and they would tease him. He's like, I don't have no problems with it. I'll see what the problem is. And he'd give me a big hug or a kiss.
But now, Justin's latest visit home has taken a tragic turn, and his bright future is hanging by a thread. In the wake of the shooting, investigators tried to gather information about what happened and why Justin was on Harvard's campus in the first place. But witnesses seem reluctant to answer questions.
There is like a park, I want to say, separating Lowell House from Kirkland House. And there were students there at the time. They wouldn't say they were scared, they're concerned, or what they had heard. Did you hear a shot? Did you hear any noise? Did you hear anybody screaming? And, these kids, they just keep walking.
Fortunately for detectives, a couple of good Samaritans were willing to help.
There were some witnesses that were outside who had seen the victim running and holding his stomach and saying he had been shot. And there were also a group of potential suspects that they described as medium to light skin, Black or Hispanic males. One of the witnesses described the varsity type jacket that one of the suspects was wearing.
Near the spot where Justin collapsed, they find a possible explanation for what the group was doing there.
There was a coat wrapped around a package, and there was 3 or 4 ounces of marijuana in a bush right next to where he was found. We thought that it was, we call it a drug rip. He was chased, and there were gunshots. So we thought maybe there was some sort of a robbery, drug deal gone bad.
That's what I think was especially shocking about this. It's not a place you would have expected it to happen.
Even more shocking is that it happened just steps away from Justin's beloved childhood home.
I can literally see this college out of my bedroom window, my living room window. I can see that is our view. Most people would die for this view. You know, everyone that comes say, oh, you have a beautiful view. Yeah, that beautiful view turned into the
deal on Harvard's campus. Given the location and sensitive nature of the crime, Harvard police immediately offer their assistance.
We were directed to the J entry, I believe, at Kirkland House. And as we were getting towards the area, we could see some blood droplets along the path that the victim had run. We just followed the traces of blood that were on the ground, and then we found what we believed was part of a crime scene.
Detectives traced the blood trail to an entrance of the Kirkland House dormitory. The question is, how Justin and his attackers got inside.
To get inside all of the Harvard buildings, you have to use a card key. You have to swipe it or insert it somewhere to get in there. The Harvard detectives started to follow up on that, and they used their IT people, and they started to look at the swipes that were used at that door within a couple hours before the incident.
Inside Kirkland House, detectives find even more evidence of the shooting.
There was what we thought was a bullet hole in one of the doors. There were 3 empty shell casings and 3 live rounds that were 9mm. On the stairs that went up from the basement of J entry towards the door.
That evening, Justin's mother, Denise Cosby, gets a call that changes her life forever.
I received a call from one of Justin's friends, Ruben. And Ruben said that he was at the police station and I needed to get to the hospital as soon as possible. I was met by a couple of police officers. And I can remember them saying there was a shooting this evening at Harvard and your son was shot. I couldn't even fathom what had gone on. You know, I'm like, are you serious? A shooting? My son had no enemies. They took me up to a room where my son he wasn't conscious, but he was breathing and he had been operated on. And I remember this doctor, and he said he was a surgeon, and he started talking to him, and he told me he had just operated on my son. He told me that he had been shot in the stomach. So I was like, okay, well, so he's gonna be okay, right? And he's like, I really can't promise that. And when he said that I think that's when my whole world went black.
Denise is soon joined by her sister Joyce, who helps her keep vigil over Justin throughout the night.
It wasn't looking good. I can remember looking at the monitors. As fast as they would give them blood, the monitors would rise and then they would drop. And it was just one of those things that I just tried to keep hope. But the more I looked at those monitors, I knew it was not good.
We started talking to him, making him all kind of promises. And I told him that if he fought to get well, or let him have my apartment. We just started bargaining with him to get him to fight.
Time was going by so fast and slow at the same time. I didn't know what was happening. But then they were saying that they couldn't stop the blood, and they used all the blood in the whole hospital.
At 3:30 a.m., nearly 12 hours after he was shot, Justin succumbs to his injuries.
I just remember when it flatlined, I had to leave the room. I I just not could believe that my child, my son, my baby, had died. It was truly my worst nightmare. It's something no parent wants to have to live through.
My whole world, his whole family's where everything just flipped. We definitely couldn't imagine this happening inside of our people, Justin.
For Denise, there was little time to mourn. When she returns home to begin making arrangements for Justin's funeral, she finds investigators waiting to talk to her.
The police was at my house pretty quickly asking questions, and I had no idea. I'm like, what happened? Why would somebody shoot my son? And then you're gonna tell me over some marijuana? Really? No, this is not the way my child lived. He was not a street person. He was not one of these people that toted guns or weapons. That's why it was so confusing. My son was not involved in any of those activities.
So how does a kid like Justin wind up getting shot over a few ounces of marijuana in a Harvard dorm? Investigators have even more questions after they find out whose keycard was used to access the building.
The information came to us from Harvard University Police that the card, the ID card that's used to swipe in to get into locked buildings at Harvard was a card from Brittany Smith, who was a student at Harvard.
Fatal shooting of 21-year-old Justin Cosby sends shockwaves across the campus of Harvard University. But when reporters try to get information from administrators, they hit a wall of silence.
Some schools are very reactive and they'll come out and they'll have press conferences. But in Harvard, it's almost like they didn't want to acknowledge something bad happened on campus.
Justin's shooters appear to have gotten into Kirkland House using a key card belonging to a senior named Brittany Smith. But Brittany doesn't live in that building. Her dorm, Lowell House, is 1 block away, which makes investigators wonder if she might be a victim as well.
She wasn't answering her phone. She wasn't answering the door. I think there may have been a light on, and we decided that it was in everybody's best interest to use the exigency standard, meaning that, you know, there could be an emergency, and we wanted to make sure that she was okay. Somebody came with a key and allowed us in. There was nobody in there.
But something in Brittany's room catches their eye.
We had seen a jacket that we remember somebody describing. There was a varsity-type jacket that had dark color. Somebody had described one of the suspects wearing that. So we locked down that as a potential crime scene as well, and then got a search warrant to go in and search.
Police take the jacket for processing. While CSIs continue searching Brittany's room for more evidence, investigators begin canvassing the rest of the building. They come across an ex-roommate of Brittany's named Kit Carroll.
She told us that she was friends with Brittany. She told me that she hadn't seen her in a while, but that she had stored some things in her room under the bed. We asked her what that was, and she said, well, the boyfriend she has now is very jealous, and she had some things from other boyfriends, and he didn't like her having those in the room. And I remember specifically there being a stuffed animal. There was a picture frame that might have had a picture, and there might have been a card from an ex-boyfriend inside a plastic bag, almost like the clear plastic bags that you line a trash can with.
Among the keepsakes, police also find some alarming evidence.
We found a handgun, a loaded handgun, and 2 IDs that belonged to 2 male students from Yale University.
Kit says she had no idea there was a gun in the bag. She often keeps her door unlocked, and according to Kit, Brittany's boyfriend often stays with Brittany and uses her key card.
She knew that he primarily kept that with him at all times, and that Brittany could find other ways to get in and out of her dorm.
Kit cooperates fully with the investigation, texting Brittany to urge her to talk to detectives. Brittany agrees to meet with them the following day, but she offers little help when she does, especially when they ask about her boyfriend.
She did not want to cooperate with us. She didn't want to give us any information about who he was or what he was doing there, about whether or not anybody else was there at the room.
Brittany says she was at Kirkland House the afternoon of the shooting, visiting a friend, and fellow Harvard classmate named Shaniqua Campbell. But when pressed for more details, Brittany becomes combative.
I do remember her being very loud and upset and not wanting to talk to us and yelling at us and telling us that we didn't know anything and she didn't know anything. At some point, she was calling us racists.
At Brittany's request, detectives move her questioning to the dean's office. Once there, Brittany temporarily changes her tune.
We were trying to make it as comfortable as possible for her, which is why we were doing it on her terms, because she wasn't agreeing to come into the police station. We figured if it was somewhere that was comfortable for her, she might be more apt to talk to us. We thought it was putting a little bit too much pressure on her to have a bunch of cops around. And so one person stayed there to ask her a couple of questions with the dean.
Brittany eventually admits the jacket in her closet does belong to her boyfriend, who she identifies as Jordan Coombs, but she's certain Jordan was wearing a hoodie on the day of the shooting. When she realizes she may have given too much information, Brittany quickly clams up.
She just decided she had had enough and said, I want an attorney. I think at that point she knew that she was in trouble herself.
Brittany's refusal to cooperate is an unfortunate roadblock, but now detectives have another person of interest, her boyfriend, Jordan Coombs.
We went online and we used investigative tools like LEAPS. We call it an all-round check. You look for licenses, you look for border probation checks, you look for warrants. And we couldn't find anybody by that name in New York City or in Massachusetts. So we thought, this can't be right.
Denise Cosby prepares to say goodbye to her beloved son.
I had no time to mourn or grieve because I had a funeral to plan.
Hundreds of mourners show up for Justin's funeral at Boston's Concord Baptist Church.
He left a lot of smiles on a lot of people's face. He made a lot of people feel good when he was here. I could not even believe from what I had heard and was hearing from people that he had touched that many lives at his young age of 21.
After a second funeral service in his hometown of Richmond, Justin is laid to rest. The mood amongst Cambridge detectives is less somber as they get some good news from forensic tests on the gun found in Brittany Smith's belongings.
The ballistics showed that it was the same weapon that was used to kill Justin. Every time you find a little piece, it's just you're getting a little closer to getting a warrant and making an arrest.
The jacket from Brittany's closet also tests positive for gunpowder residue. Brittany told them it belongs to her boyfriend, Jordan Coombs. But strangely, no one with that name appears to exist in the system.
Oftentimes when you're an investigator and you're dealing with something like a robbery or a shooting or a homicide, I would say 99% of the time you're dealing with somebody who's been involved with law enforcement in the past. We couldn't find anybody by that name with a record, so we thought that was probably an alias.
Investigators do have the names of two other persons of interest, however, and based on the IDs found with the gun, they're students at Yale.
We reached out to the Yale guys on the phone to find out why their IDs would be under the bed of somebody. We didn't tell them exactly what happened, and one of them told us the story about getting robbed, and I believe he said they took our IDs and said, we know who you are. If you call the police, we'll kill you.
According to the two students, they were victims of a setup.
They had been victims of a robbery that was set up as a drug deal. They were robbed by 2 or 3 black males, and it was very similar circumstances.
And the Yale students say the man behind it all was none other than Jordan Coombs. The two young men had met Jordan a year prior, along with his girlfriend Brittany and her friend Shaniqua Campbell. They had all bonded over their affinity for weed. The two men from Yale had made a deal to sell the trio 3 pounds of marijuana. But when the students showed up to make the sale, they were held up at gunpoint instead, and Brittany and Shaniqua were nowhere to be seen.
It happened in New York City on the rooftop of a building, and they were robbed by 2 or 3 black males, and it was very similar circumstances. We were able to put 2 and 2 together. It was definitely good information.
Police suspect that after the success of his first heist, Jordan decided to do it again, this time with Justin as the target.
It was evidence that we could use to show that there were prior bad acts if these were the same suspects, because it sure sounded like it was the same people. It was almost identical.
A bag of marijuana was found near Justin's body. And as detectives talked to more witnesses, they learned Justin had a low-key side hustle selling weed on Harvard's campus.
We spoke to some witnesses who had come across Justin Cosby and knew that he had delivered marijuana there before, or that had friends that had purchased marijuana from him. Everybody seemed to like the guy, and they had used him on different occasions, and he was very personable and expensive. They all said he was expensive. He had developed a client base by only selling marijuana at Harvard, apparently for a lot more money than you would get on the streets in Cambridge. So I thought that was pretty smart.
The university uses that information to further distance themselves from the crime.
Harvard's approach was to deal with damage control.
We have nothing to do with it. We have nothing to do with it because he shouldn't have been here. He's a drug dealer, blah, 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 blah.
I just feel like they were trying to cover their ass. They're trying to protect their image.
Reading news coverage and how they try to frame him as being a gangbanger, you know, a gangster, using that racist, you know, trope just really, really upset me a lot.
The university also takes swift action against Brittany Smith and her friend and classmate Shaniqua Campbell. Within days of Justin's shooting, both women are expelled from Harvard.
Brittany Smith and Shaniqua were just about to graduate from Harvard University. They were done. They had their last finals.
In an effort to clear her name, Brittany's friend Shaniqua comes forward and offers to tell police everything she knows.
She gave us a lot of information as it pertained to Brittany and her boyfriend.
And that boyfriend's name is quite different from the one Brittany gave them.
The alias was definitely Jordan Coombs, and the real name of the person that was using that name was Jabrai Copney.
For Denise Cosby, the investigation into her son's death is overshadowed by the narrative that her son was a hardened criminal.
When coming in contact with the media, a lot of times she would say, even before beginning, my son was not a drug dealer, and I applaud that.
My son was the poorest weed dealer that I knew, if he was dealing weed. You know, I mean, even as things went on, the investigations went on, I can remember the DA telling me that, you know, your son's probably sold enough weed to buy him and his girlfriend dinner. And that was about it.
Harvard and the media seem ready to move on from the story. But Justin's supporters are infuriated by the idea that he's a drug dealer who brought it upon himself.
They don't want to face the fact that that could have been your son there doing some stupid drug deal hardly worth anyone's life and hardly worth the time.
Shaniqua Campbell is angry about the way the university has treated her as well. She is expelled even though she hasn't been charged with any crimes. With nothing left to lose, she sits down with Cambridge police to give her side of the story. During her interview, she reveals the true identity of Brittany's mysterious boyfriend, Jordan, whose real name is Jabrai Copney.
Copney would often go to smoke with Shaniqua, and they'd get together at her dorm. So he was a frequent flyer going in and out of that building.
Detectives learned that Shaniqua and Jabrai weren't just smoking recreationally. Jabrai was trying to operate a small criminal enterprise out of Brittany's Lowell House dorm.
They were actually bringing drugs to the campus, having drugs delivered to Lowell House. So he was living there and having drugs delivered, and I assume distributing them. So he was like a drug dealer that was operating out of Lowell House, which, when you think about it, is shocking and disturbing.
And according to Shaniqua, that's how Justin became a target.
She knew that Cosby sold marijuana and was trying to see if he could get other stuff.
Shaniqua's confession appears to expose an underbelly that was alive and well within the hallowed halls of Harvard.
I think that Harvard students are like any other students. They engage in that sort of thing. They party, they have a good time, and they probably smoke pot. And there was kind of like an underbelly there that was exposed, and I don't think anybody liked that.
Shaniqua denies any involvement in the robberies, but says Copney told her about his plans during one of their hangouts. Investigators are skeptical, however.
I think the two of them came up with the plan probably while they were together smoking one night, which seems like it was something they did pretty regularly. She knew that she could set something up to rob this guy who was bringing marijuana into Harvard. And that's when Copney set up the transaction.
For now, Shaniqua manages to avoid any criminal charges, and the police hope they can use her to get to Copney. But he surprises everyone when he turns himself in.
Jabri Copney retained the services from a high-profile attorney who I know from past cases, and then they came into the police station to sit down and talk with us, and he was placed under arrest at that point.
According to Copney, the plan was never to kill Justin.
He employed two of his friends from home in New York City to come and meet him, to help him with the robbery and to bring a firearm. And the plan was just to rob him. I don't think there was ever any intention to shoot him.
His two accomplices were 23-year-old Jason Aquino and 19-year-old Blaine Jiggets, who went by the street name Fat Boy.
He wanted to have at least one other person there to have numbers on his side in case there was an incident. And then Aquino became involved because he supplied the firearm. I think the promise was to split the profit from that large amount of marijuana. If there was 3 pounds, you're talking about, what, 48 ounces times $500 an ounce? So substantial amount of money if they came away with that stuff.
But the plan quickly unraveled. Justin was only able to secure a small amount, not the 3 pounds they thought he was bringing. But the trio decided to take it anyway.
There was a tussle over the bag that he had that had the marijuana in it. He eventually pulled that away from them and ran up the stairs that went to the ground level at Kirkland House.
Copney claims Jiggets is the one who chased Justin and shot him. Investigators find Jiggets living with his family in New York City. It takes longer for them to track down Jason Aquino. Their hunt leads them all the way to Mount Vernon, New York. Eventually, they spot Aquino and some other friends coming out of a fast food restaurant.
We were dealing with people that we believed to be armed and dangerous who had killed somebody, so everybody had their guns out. They were immediately put up against the wall and patted down and handcuffed.
Copney, Jiggets, and Aquino are all charged with murder, while Shaniqua Campbell cuts a deal to avoid arrest.
She became a witness for the prosecution, and so she was immune from prosecution.
Brittany Smith isn't as lucky. Although, like Shaniqua, she initially had a non-prosecution agreement, Brittany broke the terms of that agreement after telling a grand jury she knew nothing about the murder weapon. Police later determined she had hidden the weapon in her bag, effectively negating her deal.
Brittany, she lied to the grand jury, said that she did not know anything about the gun when they found out that she actually handled the gun.
People make smart choices and say, I'm part of Harvard and I have a great future ahead of me, and she threw it all away for this young man. I cannot imagine a poorer choice.
Brittany Smith. But for Denise Cosby, it's only the first step toward justice. She attends every pre-trial hearing to make sure her son is represented.
I wanted Blaine Jiggets. I wanted Jason Aquino. I wanted Brittany Smith, Shaniqua, and Jabri to know that Justin had somebody that loved him. You didn't just hurt or kill my son. You hurt a lot of people.
In the 2 years leading up to the trials, Blaine Jiggets and Jason Aquino make plea deals, agreeing to testify against Copney in exchange for lighter sentences. But like Brittany Smith, Aquino gets caught lying to a grand jury.
I remember he went in to testify, and then the DA coming out in the hallway because we were all kept outside, and he came out and said he just lied on the stand.
As a result, Aquino adds perjury to his list of charges. On April 6, 2011, the trial for the group's ringleader, Jabri Copney, finally begins. Shaniqua Campbell, the State Star witness, testifies that Copney planned to rob Justin by posing as a Harvard student.
He somehow tricked him into believing it would be a transaction with Harvard students who are normally decent people and not murderers and not armed, certainly.
When Jiggets takes the stand, he tells the jury he got the 9mm gun used in the shooting from Aquino.
They went to Brittany's room and the gun was taken out of the bag and maybe even handed around so everybody in the room had seen the gun, and there was talk about what they were going to do.
Blaine Jiggets loaded the gun in Brittany's room. And then Jabri went out to scout a place to pull off the robbery. Then they used Brittany's phone to call Justin.
Copney claimed Jiggets was the one who fired the gun. But Jiggets says it was the other way around, that it was Copney who shot Justin.
Justin broke away from him and tried to run. And when he tried to run up the stairs, that's when they started shooting wildly.
There were 3 spent shell casings from a 9mm and 3 live rounds. And we were trying to put 2 and 2 together with the DA. And then it came to us, mostly from Hollywood, that young kids don't know how to use guns, and whenever you see them, they're holding it sideways, and they all think that they have to pull the slide back. Everyone wants to hear that. The gun didn't have a live bullet in the chamber, so we believe that he pulled the trigger and nothing happened. He pulls it back, lets it go, and now that chamber's a live round, which he shoots. I'm not sure which one of the 3 shots hit Justin Cosby, but one of them hit him.
The defense accuses the state's witnesses of lying to protect themselves. The prosecutors submit evidence of Copney's DNA on the murder weapon and gunshot residue on his jacket. The jury ultimately finds Copney guilty of murder.
Copney was sentenced to life without parole.
Jabri got just what he deserved. Had it not been for him and Brittany allowing him to live in her dorm room and do these things, they would have had no reason to be there. My son would be alive today.
Jason Aquino is sentenced to 20 years in prison. Blaine Jiggets gets 12. Brittany Smith is the last of the 4 to face a trial, but at the last minute, she decides to plead guilty instead.
We knew that they all went back to her room, that she was actually the one that hid the gun in her friend's room.
For her role in the crime, Brittany receives a 3-year sentence.
People tell me she deserved a lot more than she got. But my thing was to make sure that they all took some type of responsibility for what had happened to my son. None of it would bring my son back.
Many, including Denise, believe Harvard also bore some responsibility for Justin's death. So in 2012, she sued the university for negligence.
He was going to Kirkland House, which is a safe place, expecting to be dealing with students. The last thing he expected was to run into Jabri Copney, an imposter who was a violent and dangerous individual.
The lawsuit argues that the university allowed Copney to stay on campus for months using Brittany's key card.
Jabri Copney was living with his girlfriend, Brittany Smith, right in Lowell House. They broke their own rules. In fact, I quoted the rules in my complaint when I sued the university. If you stay for more than a night or 2, you're not allowed to. You have to be kicked out. He should have been kicked out.
But for the breach of security, this probably would not have happened.
Denise loses the case, but not her dedication to her son.
She been holding it down and making sure that his name stays alive. So, you know, we gonna make sure that too, for sure. Can't forget somebody like Carlos, you can't.
I cannot even think of Justin being deceased. I know he's physically gone, but his spirit is still here.
I want people to know who Justin really was. He wasn't just that little kid that got killed because he was trying to sell somebody some weed. He was a human being. He made a mistake by doing that. That punishment did not fit the crime. And I wanted people to know. I'm very proud of him. I'm very proud of Justin because he was a good person.
Philadelphia, Pennsylvania is steeped in history, going back to the beginning of the United States. But not all of that history is something to be proud of. And in 1985, it turned on its own in one of the most terrifying ways imaginable. Philadelphia is one of the oldest cities in America. Founded in 1682, it played an instrumental role in the American Revolution.
America breaking away from Britain and dealing with the aspect of its independence rests very, very clearly in Philadelphia. It has a very intense and very articulate political and constitutional involvement.
There were two essential founding documents developed in Philadelphia. One was the Declaration of Independence, and the second one was the United States Constitution.
But that same independence wouldn't be extended to the Black community for quite some time.
In each one of those documents, this inequality that you see still manifested in the way Black people are treated was crystallized in those early documents.
After Philadelphia abolished slavery during the American Revolution in 1780, it became known as the nation's cultural and financial center, with a large Black population at its core. Then a boom in the textile industry drew immigrants from around the world.
It's always been things going on within Philadelphia that would bring every generation, every culture in.
Since then, Philadelphia's diverse population continues to soar, contributing to its rich culture.
This is a beautiful place. We have the rivers and, but really nice architecture, and it's a warm feeling when you come into Philadelphia. Very friendly. Folks has a lot of trust in one another, like to, work together on different projects for the greater good of the community. I wouldn't leave Philadelphia for the world.
Today, the city contains over 1.5 million people and continues to be a popular tourist destination.
It's a historical town for music. A lot of producers, musicians came out of here. We had some sports figures come out of Philadelphia. We have Hollywood coming to Philadelphia, Rocky Balboa. We have Boyz II Men. All of those guys, who really, push the culture in a positive direction.
Our city has birthed so many outstanding African Americans, and these men worked hard for Philadelphia to make Philadelphia what it is.
But Philadelphia's past also includes a long history of corruption, from organized crime to the local government. Despite its nickname, the City of Brotherly Love, the residents of Philadelphia have often been in conflict with one another.
There's a great history that Philadelphia has, both on the light side and also on the dark side. Very dark underbelly. Poverty, drugs, you name it, and cops who were basically very corrupt were taking advantage of that situation with the racist abuse. Systemic racism basically controlled and does control a lot of what obviously the city is.
In the late 70s, early 80s, Philadelphia was still one of the most segregated cities, neighborhoods and otherwise in the country. Many members of the Ku Klux Klan were police officers, they were mayors, they were senators. So there was always a tradition of enforcing using excessive force force with no limits that was often legitimized, authorized, and justified by a caste system based on race.
And for those who called Philadelphia home, it's on the roof.
The bomb explodes, creates an entire fire, decimating 3 blocks of a neighborhood.
When the smoke finally clears, 11 people are dead. The city of Philadelphia has just bombed its own citizens. But how did it come to this? The unrest began several decades earlier. The civil rights movements of the 1950s and 60s brought the rise of many different activists and organizations, including Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the NAACP.
Philadelphia in 1970, it was going through a fairly significant political movement. And the Black Panther Party was fairly active at the time. The Black community was organizing politically in a way that it had not been before.
One such organization was MOVE, a group of Black revolutionaries in Philadelphia.
In order for life to continue, it must move. And if it doesn't, it stagnates and dies. Movement is the essence of life, and the MOVE organization is in direct representative of explaining that essence. So that's how the name MOVE became to be the name of the organization.
The group was founded in 1972 by Vincent Leaphart, who soon changed his name to John Africa.
John Africa was a poor man from a poor family in a poor section of the city of Philadelphia. You could see the police intimidating people and going through the neighborhood and very disrespectfully treating the citizens. His experience, in large part, shaped his behavior.
After witnessing the perils of the Korean War while serving in the Army, John was determined to bring about change.
The war definitely enhanced what he already felt and could see. He couldn't accept it even when he was a child. He couldn't even tolerate it.
John put together a set of guidelines to live by that encouraged absolute equality amongst all living things.
John was arguing that people aren't born with the idea of race and economic status. They're taught those things.
John also felt that government in all forms was inherently racist, oppressive, and dangerous.
He talked about the system and how they misuse people. We're all under an oppressive system that is poisoning the life that we need to live. The air is polluted, the water is polluted, the food that we eat is weakened by the system's industries.
Some big ideas for MOVE are embracing all life, animal life, human life, plant life. They had certain ideas about diet and lifestyle, communal living,
village.
It's a very mixed area, and then you have this melting pot of people and classes and personalities, and MOVE flourished in that community. Daily life was full of activity, it was full of laughter, it was full of movement, just constant movement.
But that would all change in the coming years, and the MOVE organization would go from peaceful commune to public enemy number one.
People fear what they don't understand. And I think that fear turned into a kind of like a thing that they felt they needed to eliminate.
It's the mid-1970s, and cities like Philadelphia are experiencing a backlash from the passing of the Civil Rights Act. The conflict between police and Black communities continues to rise.
And Philadelphia had a whole series of police shootings throughout that period of time for which nobody paid any price, and these police officers got away with it.
The members of the Black liberation group called MOVE are protesting social injustice and raising their children in accordance with their beliefs.
MOVE children did not go to school. We taught reading, writing, and arithmetic. We very intentionally left out the heroic stories of George Washington, and we talked more about Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks and Malcolm X, the struggles that we ourselves face as freedom fighters.
The MOVE guidelines call for its members to bring about revolution by protesting institutions that operate against their beliefs.
And they wanted to be heard. They did peaceful protests. They had signs, the right way.
The disruption definitely got into the papers. Protesting was a big part of getting the attention about the mission.
There were a lot of arrests. Like, arrest itself became a form of protest. And then we'll disrupt the court proceedings at every single one. We'll come into every court proceeding and question the judge and question the procedure and represent themselves, say this is not I object, every word I object, I object.
The group's mission to disrupt the system eventually led neighbors to file complaints with the Philadelphia police about the undesirable living conditions at the MOVE's Powelton Village headquarters.
They had this habit of discarding trash and refuse in the streets, and there were always neighborhood complaints about unsanitary conditions, the noise, the filth, that was emanating from the house.
There were a lot of people that you could just feel the disdain. People saw us as a disruption. They saw us as wrong, as crazy or whatever.
This quickly gains the attention of Philadelphia Mayor Frank Rizzo.
You can't talk about policing in Philadelphia without talking about Frank Rizzo. Rizzo was the police chief of Philadelphia, and then he became the mayor of Philadelphia, and in a lot of ways is a archetypal figure in American history, I would say. Rizzo was very comfortable using racist language. He was a figure of overt white supremacy.
The complaints gave Mayor Rizzo a reason to open an investigation in regards to MOVE and potentially take legal action to get rid of them.
Officers begin making regular appearances in the neighborhood, and tensions quickly escalate. March 28, 1976, police and MOVE members get into an altercation outside of their headquarters. 6 MOVE members are arrested. Afterwards, MOVE reports that the altercation had turned deadly.
According to MOVE, Life Africa was a small baby, a newborn, who was born to one of the MOVE members and then soon after died in a confrontation with police. In MOVE's telling, the child was ripped from the mother's arms and stomped by police and killed. This is sort of the first blood, right? This is the sort of initial act of murderous violence that everything tracks back to.
Due to their beliefs, MOVE refuses to allow an autopsy of the baby, and police deny claims that a baby was killed during the altercation. So an investigation never takes place. In turn, MOVE takes a more aggressive stance against the police.
They felt as though they had to go in safe mode to protect their families, and wanted to use their rights to bear arms, to support that.
John Africa built a platform around MOVE's house, and on May 20th, 1977, MOVE took a stand and said, no more. We ain't accepting this no more. If you come at us, we're going to defend ourselves. So MOVE, much like the Black Panthers, standing on our property, armed with weapons. If you come at us with fists, we'll match you with fists. If you come at us with clubs, we will use clubs. If you come in here shooting our brothers and sisters, we will shoot back in defense of our lives.
Armed MOVE members also demand police to release their imprisoned members. The city decides eviction is the only way to return order to Powelton Village. But when that doesn't work, the city tries to force the group out by cutting off their water and electricity.
The standoff was in full effect. It was just there were just tactics to try to find a way to disband the group. The police put up a blockade around the street, so you weren't allowed in and you weren't allowed out. There's no food or water coming in and out. No one to support that group. This thing was designed to totally isolate them and separate them from the rest of the world to the point where they're out of resources and they have to come out. It didn't work for them because members of the community were so supportive and they continued to bring food.
The city strikes a deal with MOVE to release the jailed members if they promise to vacate the premises.
MOVE said, we'll take some land to go along with our people released and we'll roll out. They did release our political prisoners.
But the peace is short-lived. There's another clash, and this time, MOVE fires back.
When that exchange that they dragged into the house, cut a hole in our floor, and shot directly down on top of the people that were in the house.
It's at that point that gunfire rings out.
It's disputed who fired first. The police will insist there were shots fired from inside the house.
The police shot hundreds of rounds of ammunition at the people inside the house. There was tear gas. There was smoke grenades. People were screaming, the kids were crying, and all of that. It was chaos.
When the smoke clears, Officer James Ramp is dead, and several other cops and firefighters are injured. All MOVE members surrender.
Very dramatic images of people emerging from the basement. I mean, you have naked babies in what looks to be a war zone. And then you have Delbert, who emerges sort of from the other side.
Delbert Africa was pulled from the building by his dreadlocks, kicked and beaten on the streets.
He was unarmed and he had his hands in the air and he was treated as if he was the scum of the earth.
For the murder of Officer Ramp, 9 members of MOVE are arrested.
Typically, when someone is killed, there's one person that gets the murder charge and then the other ones get the conspiracy charge. Well, in this case, every member was charged with murder.
At court, Delbert Africa and the other members known as the MOVE 9 attest that MOVE did not fire any shots, and Officer Ramp died as a result of friendly fire.
You could argue that MOVE did it. You could argue that MOVE didn't do it. But what you can't argue is that the police destroyed the entire crime scene. To tear down the house, within hours after a crime took place, to destroy the trees that would hold bullets that could prove the innocence of MOVE, and MOVE not get the opportunity to present the case for their innocence.
All members of the MOVE 9 are convicted of third-degree murder.
Every member was sentenced to 30-year minimum, 100-year maximum sentences, including my parents.
Of course, they are all found not guilty.
I don't think it was a surprise to anyone when that happened. I mean, that was historically the way people had been treated by the police.
But the conflict is far from over. In fact, the worst is yet to come. In November of 1983, 5 years after the deadly confrontation in Powelton Village, Wilson Goode becomes the city's first black mayor.
Frank Rizzo was no longer a political force in the city of Philadelphia. But nevertheless, there was a certain mindset prevalent, I believe, in the Philadelphia Police Department that carried over into the new leadership. There would have been resentment in the department that MOVE was not only surviving, but seemed to be reviving and growing.
John Africa has relocated the MOVE headquarters to his sister Louise's townhouse on Osage Avenue.
Osage Avenue was like a middle-class African-American neighborhood. with row houses that were largely well kept and well maintained.
Life on Osage Avenue was just a peaceful environment. Neighbors did watch out for one another. And when the MOVE members came onto the block, they compromised that and caused tension.
Their mission in life was to get the 9 members who were incarcerated released. And so the strategy that they utilized was to disrupt the lives of the neighbors in such a way that they would get the attention of the powers that be in the city of Philadelphia.
They installed several loudspeakers on the house, and they broadcast an endless stream of obscenities.
As soon as they thought that we were asleep, they got on the PA system and started on the move, we are MOVE. I'm like, I'm not again tonight.
The group also began reinforcing their new headquarters.
They were constructing this bunker. It had a slit in it to use firearms, and it was strategically positioned much higher than the roofs of every other house.
They fortified the windows. They fortified the area leading into the yard. They had a sense something that was going to be coming their way.
Osage residents filed several complaints with the city, but the city does nothing.
They cared nothing at all about the ordinary working-class black men and women who were on the receiving end of their tirades and their reaction, all in an effort to get their 9 members released from prison.
Finally, after years of unsettling behavior, the neighbors band together and go to major news outlets to demand action against MOVE.
They held a press conference in April of 1985 and demanded that the governor of the state of Pennsylvania intervene, that somebody should come. The mayor at the time, Wilson Goode, had no idea how to deal with it. And in fact, he pretty much ignored it for as long as he could until that press conference. The mayor made a decision in early April to do something about MOVE.
The mayor puts Police Commissioner Gregor Sambor and the Philadelphia police in charge of how they will confront MOVE.
It was characterized as a police problem, and the police readily accepted the leadership position and readily accepted the assignment to figure out a solution to that problem.
And on Sunday, May 12th, the police report to Osage Avenue.
They evacuated several blocks because they anticipated that this could turn violent.
They went door to door to all of the neighbors on that block and told them to pack an overnight bag.
Then at 3:30 a.m. on May 13th, SWAT teams arrive and water cannons are positioned outside the row house. Inside are 13 members of MOVE, 6 children, 3 women, and 4 men, including John Africa.
Some of those same officers who were there in '78 were positioned with sniper rifles and guns in the back alleyway behind the MOVE compound.
At 5:35 a.m., Police Commissioner Sambor makes a statement.
Gregor Sambor got on the loudspeaker and said, "MOVE, we have an arrest warrant for 5 of your members." A male and a female got on the microphone and cussed him out. "You better make sure your insurance is paid up, you white redneck police officers, because MOVE members will be sleeping with your wives after you die."
They yelled at each other all day. It was just a matter of who got the bigger mouths. They told them to come out. They told them go do themselves.
In response, police fire water cannons and tear gas canisters into the house. Then SWAT teams move in, and the situation takes a dramatic turn.
There were news crews on the street by this point, and you could hear shots being fired from automatic weapons. It's unclear at this point what exactly is happening, but police are no longer treating this as a peaceful arrest.
In 90 minutes, They shot 10,000 rounds of ammunition into that row house.
Thousands of Philadelphia residents watch every terrifying moment from their living rooms.
This is the first time, really, ever, that the news went live and stayed live. The next thing that comes out on the news is the helicopter circling.
It's an ominous sign of the explosive violence that will soon stun all of Philadelphia. Recent events are a reminder that what happened in Philadelphia in 1985 is still happening today. A conflict between black citizens and police with no easy solution.
In the case of MOVE, you had an organization of black people trying to shine a light on abuse by police and government. Their methods weren't well received, but their point is made by the way law enforcement reacted. If you throw gasoline on a fire, it's going to burn, and we're still seeing that across the country today.
Under the guidance of Police Commissioner Gregor Sambor, the violent standoff on Osage Avenue between Philadelphia police and the members of MOVE has reached a boiling point.
Police, they are now frustrated and angry that MOVE is still defying them. And they decide to get a police helicopter and circle over the building.
A member of the bomb squad suggests dropping C4 plastic explosives from the helicopter.
They have the high ground. They have line of sight and line to fire at everything. And the bunker is fortified. So the logic was we can't safely go in there with that bunker intact. And so to eliminate the bunker, we're going to drop a bomb from a helicopter.
The goal was to open an entryway for police to enter MOVE headquarters through the roof.
At 5 o'clock that day, the mayor approved the use of explosives on the roof. The bomb actually dropped at 5:27.
The bomb ignites a stockpile of gasoline, and the resulting explosion is much larger than expected. Within moments, the building is on fire.
We were all transfixed in front of our television screens, watching this thing unfold. In the first 30 or 40 minutes, the fire looked to be just in the bunker.
And eventually the roof burns through and the bunker itself falls into the house, and now the fire's inside the house.
As the winds blew, it attached to other homes and ignited one house after another, causing a domino effect.
The mayor himself was screaming at his television set, saying, "Why aren't they putting out the fire?"
At 6:25, Mayor Good orders the fire chief to step in, but the MOVE house continues to burn.
The children and the women were in the basement with blankets, over them to protect them from the smoke.
One of the children, Tommaso Africa, begins having difficulty breathing. Conrad Africa tries to help Tommaso escape from a basement window. They are met with gunfire.
Tommaso was the youngest of them. He wasn't breathing at the time, and Conrad was trying to get them out. The police said he had a gun, and when he lifted up the door, he said some things to the police officers, and they shot him.
Conrad is forced to climb back inside with Tommaso and the rest of the MOVE members. 30-year-old Ramona Africa then tries to escape with 13-year-old Michael Birdie Africa.
They don't know if they're going to be shot at. They just know that they have to get out of that building. Thankfully, one of the officers stepped in to help them.
That's when James Bergauer makes, I think, one of the only human decisions of the day to try to go help Michael, who is a child. That likely results in Michael surviving.
He's traumatized. He's crying. He was saying to the cops that, "Please don't kill me. Please don't kill me." Because that's how afraid he was, having seen everything that he had just seen.
The flames continue to burn for 5 more hours until they are finally... The conflict between MOVE and police has ended in a way no one could have imagined. And the city of Philadelphia demands answers.
250 neighborhood residents were displaced. 61 row houses were destroyed, and the actual financial cost to the city exceeded $28 million.
My family members lost everything that they worked hard for. Our history was erased.
The public was calling for justice and vindication, and Wilson Goode did wisely, created the commission to look at it.
The Public Commission investigates all of the decisions made by officials leading up to the bombing to determine if any charges should be brought.
Everybody knew that there were 5 children in that building. The excuse was that the MOVE members are armed and dangerous. They had no reason to believe that MOVE had amassed the kind of arsenal that would have justified the type of artillery that they took out there. Every mistake they made from that point on just compounded so that inevitably you have the catastrophe that occurred.
Commissioner Sambor testifies that he approved the bombing and notified the mayor. But Mayor Goode remembers events differently.
Wilson Goode says in his testimony that they called him and they told him they were going to use an explosive device, and he approved it. But if they'd said they were going to use a bomb, he would not have approved that.
The 2 men also disagree about who decided to let the fire burn.
Goode says he talks to Sambor on the phone and tells him to put the fire out.
When the fire commissioner Richmond said, I think we should fight the fire, Commissioner Sambor says, let it burn for a while. Just let it burn. He overrode his decision and let the fire burn.
But according to Sambor, he only wanted the bunker to burn. He did not intend for the fire to get out of control.
I never believed Sambor when he said that wasn't his intention.
Despite his hands-off approach that day, Mayor Wilson Goode accepts the blame for the tragedy.
Mayor Goode's remorse was apparent. During his testimony, it was clear that his heart ached for what occurred, because that happened on your watch. Wilson said, I take full responsibility for what happened.
The commission ultimately rules that both city and police officials were negligent in their actions.
We had 30-some findings and conclusions. The decisions of various city officials to allow the use of high explosives and, in a 90-minute period, the firing of at least 10,000 rounds of ammunition at the house, to sanction the dropping of a bomb on an occupied row house, and let a fire burn in a row house occupied by children would not likely have been made had the MOVE house and its occupants been situated in a comparable white neighborhood.
However, no criminal charges were filed.
They were never facing any punishment whatsoever because industry wanted a problem gone. And that problem was exposing industry.
The only person convicted of committing a crime during the incident is Ramona Africa, the sole surviving adult member of MOVE.
Ramona Africa was charged with riot, and she was sentenced to 7 years.
After 41 years, the last member of the MOVE 9 is finally released from prison.
When my father came home, I told him, you deserve to have whatever you want. What do you want? And my dad looked at me and he said, Mike, all I want is to marry your mom, like I should have done 40 years ago.
Today, the organization continues to fight for their beliefs, but they know retaliation could come again at any moment.
What happened to my family could happen tomorrow. The system it's a dangerous thing. Anyone that has the notion to speak up and to resist the system and create change, you're definitely going to be targeted.
As society evolves, one way to move forward is to change the perception police have of the communities they are sworn to protect and serve. But for the city of Philadelphia, the events of May 13th, 1985 will never be forgotten.
I think about the kids every day. It still hurts, but that we ain't giving up. As long as there is a system that is threatening us every day, all day, 365, we have to fight.